All right, guys, we're just going to hit on some popular sleepers we're avoiding to wrap things up here. And I'm going to share both your names here for this first pick because, Jagger, you're avoiding Chase Brown, and Erickson, you're avoiding Zack Moss. So these are two guys in the same backfield fighting for carries in what could be quite a good, we're expecting a very strong offense overall. So, Jagger, you can go first. Why are you avoiding Chase Brown and presumably maybe going after Zack Moss, or just avoiding the backfield entirely?
I'm kind of avoiding the backfield. Like Zack Moss, I'll take. Like in Dynasty, I'll buy him, and then like in like best ball, I'll take him. But in redraft, I'm just particularly don't like to bet on Zack Moss, where I have to like physically set him in my lineup, But for Chase Brown, I think that we're not going to see much more than what we saw last year. He's not a great runner, and then and this is what I want to tell people too. This is a kind of a tale of two teams here. I'm not trying to go to talk about the Titans, but why I have a little bit of reservation about the Titans. The Bengals never had like an inventive offense. Chase Brown needs like a 49ers and Miami offense where he can use his speed, just get a hole and run. He doesn't have great vision. He's best used as a receiver. So like when you have Zack Moss, who was an incredibly efficient runner last year, he's not special, but he can get the job done. He's clearly, especially what they paid him, he's clearly the early down back. So what am I buying Chase Brown for? If am I buying Chase Brown to be a Zack Moss handcuff? Does that sound good? I just don't understand it. And especially around his range, there's other guys that I would rather be excited and ultimately disappointed in later.
So, Erickson, are you avoiding the backfield entirely as well, or are you specifically going after Chase Brown because you don't believe in Zack Moss?
I do not believe in Zack Moss at all. I think Zack Moss, like every time I see his name, I'm like, is he the worst pick in fantasy football? Is it Zack Moss? And I don't mean to be like super mean to the guy, but if I'm looking at we're always talking about who's this year's Puka Nacua, who's this year's Kyron Williams, who's this year's Alexander Madison. To me, that's Zack Moss.
That's
like
fair.
A guy that we're just like projecting, okay, he's going to be the starting running back for a good offense. We feel good about that. But when has Zack Moss ever actually earned playing time? Last year, right? So JT has this holdout suspension thing going on. Deion Jackson plays arguably the single worst game you could ever play with like 100% snap share in week 1 for the Colts. Evan Hull breaks his arm or gets injured out for the season. And then they're like, okay, now we'll give the ball to Zack Moss. Like if he had not gotten that opportunity because of all those injuries and all those things that happened in Indianapolis, Zack Moss wouldn't even be on a team right now. Where was Zack Moss in dynasty rankings before the beginning of last year? Nowhere. He was on every single waiver wire because he's not a good running back. Like he's not good. And he's not been not good for his entire NFL career. He's been beaten out by Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary is like the most replaceable running back. We talk about it and joke around it. That's why we like Tyrone Tracy. Because we think he can take Devin Singletary's job. Devin Singletary wiped the floor with Zack Moss. And we're expecting Zack Moss to be step in and be like, oh, he's going to dominate touches over Chase Brown. Chase Brown earned touches alongside a healthy Joe Mixon. That's saying something. Zack Moss has never earned touches alongside another healthy running back that was at least somewhat good. That's never happened before. So I just think that Moss has never shown anything where he can actually earn and win a backfield. I don't think he can do that. Chase Brown did it at Illinois. He was a workhorse bell cow at the college level. And even last year as a rookie, barely played the beginning of the year. He was put on injured reserve, facing a wicked uphill battle. Joe Mixon was being productive, and yet they still found ways to get Chase Brown onto the field as a day 3 pick. I think that really opens my eyes to how they view Chase Brown, how like, hey, we have to get this guy on the field. And he delivered when he got the opportunities to play. We were worried about Joe Mixon, like, guys, how are we feeling about Joe Mixon? Chase Brown keeps eating into his workload every single week. So I think that Chase Brown, with the explosiveness that he can offer as a receiver out of the backfield, that's who I want in this Bengals backfield. I want Chase Brown, and Zack Moss, to me, is a plotter, a running back that's super replaceable. And I think what's most ironic about him signing with the Bengals, the last start he had for the Colts, 84% snap share. He had 13 carries for 28 yards, 2.2 yards per carry against the Bengals. And they signed him to a contract. Don't know why.
Well, I was gonna mention that on the fact that they signed him pretty early in the free agency period. Did they not? Am I misremembering that? I thought it was like, I mean, it was early. So like, doesn't that tell you that like, they gave him
$4 million per season and $3 million guaranteed.
Sure,
that's.
But if they thought Chase Brown could handle the role, wouldn't they not have gone and immediately signed a player who was theoretically not very good at theoretically the least valuable position.
I mean, they knew they had to add a running back to replace Joe Mixon, and they can't just have one running back on the team. Like, they have to sign somebody. So it's either that or draft somebody. And they're like, oh, Zach Moss is available. Let's just sign him.
I guess I tend to kind of lean, I think, with Jagger, A, in terms of ranking this backfield, but B, the overall point being I might just be avoiding this backfield and not wanting to take the swing and try and guess who it's actually going to be, because I think there's red flags with both of these guys, and there's maybe positive arguments too, but I think I'm probably just going to avoid in the area that they're going. Jagger, who's your other sleeper that you're avoiding?
It's Ben Sinnott. And this hurts for me because he's one of my special prospects that I love. I love Ben Sinnott in a vacuum, but especially in redraft, guys, we need to really cope with reality. Sam Laporta is an outlier. He isn't. They don't make Sam Laportas they don't grow on trees. I've done this game. I'm not like Pat Fitz, but like we just talked about it. My knees hurt a little bit. So I've seen some things I've never seen to Sam Laporta. And Kyle Pitts is an athletic freak. That's the only reason why he can't do that. Ben Sinnott, as much as I like him, he's not that. Moreover, Sam Laporta was drafted to one of the best offensive minds right now, one of the new hot names out there. And Ben Sinnott got drafted to Cliff Kingsbury. So we all remember what that was. And I'm not saying that like Cliff Kingsbury is just like a death sentence for fantasy production, because even though he's not NFL, I think great. And I think Cliff Kingsbury teams are allergic to the red zone, which is terrible for tight ends. I think that he at least gives you fantasy viable players. But another thing that we don't consider is he has a rookie quarterback. So jot that down. And then on top of that, I feel like I have to say this again. Sam Laporta is an outlier, guys. Like, we can't keep chasing these outliers. So like, even for Dynasty, I think Ben Sinnott's price is a little too high. And if you're gonna be getting a tight end too, go get like Pat Freiermuth. Like I think Ben Sinnott's going ahead of Pat Freiermuth sometimes. And like, Pat Freiermuth doesn't suck. Kenny Pickett sucks. Let's not let former players hurt us. They're gone. They can't do that anymore. Yeah. So he's my guy. And like, I guess the final note is he's a rookie tight end, guys. Again, I'm saying the same thing a third time, a different way. Like, rookie tight ends producing so well it's an incredible outlier. So.
I mean, it might be repetitive. I think it's worth repeating though, because I think Sam Laporta is going to be very fresh in everybody's minds. And yeah. I don't think you can emphasize enough that is very likely to not repeat. Like, yeah, you could bet pretty much the mortgage on that not repeating this year with any of these guys. Even, a guy like Brock Bowers, who's a generational prospect, we wouldn't expect a Sam Laporta season, let alone somebody who went, around later and is in, doesn't have the same prospect pedigree. Erickson, what do you make of him this year?
Yeah, so two things with Sinnott. We've seen Cliff Kingsbury play Zach Ertz over a uber talented rookie tight end. His name was Trey McBride.
Yeah.
He played Zach Ertz over him. Zach Ertz is on the Commanders. Like, this could happen again as long as Zach Ertz isn't injured. So that's what you have to keep in mind. Like, Zach Ertz is on the depth chart, and I know that we all forget about that, but Cliff Kingsbury played Zach Ertz over Trey McBride, who we now are talking about being the tight end one overall in redraft and that's how Trey McBride is viewed. And yes, Cliff Kingsbury played Zach Ertz ahead of him. The other thing is, when he was first drafted, Sinnott, Adam Peters compared him a lot to like Kyle Juszczyk, a fullback. He played a lot of fullback at the college level. So That's also another interesting quirk, which is like, okay, where is he actually playing on the field? Yep. Like, is he actually blocking more? Like, that's not good because we want him out catching passes. So like, don't be surprised. I think you got to be patient with Sinnott. Like, don't go into your draft being like, oh, I got my tight end, I'm good to go with Sinnott, because there's a lot of scenarios where we look up after week one, we're like, yikes, like, this is not going to pan out, at least early on, when Zach Ertz runs 90% of the routes and Ben Sinnott blocks on half of the snaps. So that could be concerning.
It's also like tight end is deeper than it has been in recent years. So there's just other later round sleepers that I'm going to be more interested in, who are a little more proven, or I think have a higher ceiling, or for whatever reason. Like, there will be options if you're looking to take a swing on a tight end in that range of the draft. There will just be other ones I like better. Erickson, the final sleeper you are avoiding is?
Yep. So for me, it's MarShawn Lloyd. and I know that I'm ruffling some feathers because I know Derek Brown loves MarShawn Lloyd a lot. But again, I'm looking for, who's this year's Tank Bigsby, right? Somebody that nonstop last year was all the hype about Tank Bigsby, this rookie running back. He's going to be a monster. And what happened? He wasn't good. Like, he did not infect Travis Etienne whatsoever. It didn't make a difference. And I kind of think MarShawn Lloyd is more of a Tank Bigsby type of player where I think that he's being talked up a lot. But why are we excited about drafting a running back as part of a three-way committee? Like, I know that we're using, the coach speak about MarShawn Lloyd is he's going to be more involved. LaFleur loves to use multiple running backs. If you look at Coach Speak Index over on X, like, this is what LaFleur has said about Josh Jacobs. I do think he's very capable of being a high volume feature back when he's getting the bulk of the carries, but we'll see how it plays out. And then talking about the running back rotation, typically we like to platoon those guys, whether it's 2 guys or 3 guys. Josh Jacobs, AJ Dillon, MarShawn Lloyd. If Josh Jacobs goes down, are we just 100% locking in MarShawn Lloyd to like this uber elite role?
Yes.
I don't think we are. I don't think we are. And why would I take a risk on that when I could just draft someone like Tyler Algier? If Bijan Robinson goes down, I know Tyler Algier is the guy. Whereas I'm not so sold that MarShawn Lloyd will necessarily be the guy if Josh Jacobs were to go down. So for me, I'm just not as high on MarShawn Lloyd as everybody else. You look at what he did at the college level. He never took over a college backfield, ever. He never surpassed 150 touches in any of the seasons. He had 3 games with 20 or more touches. What screams about MarShawn Lloyd that he's a uber bell cow? Nothing. And he was drafted to a team that likes to use rotation. So I think he's going to be a rotational running back regardless of how things shake out. So I'm just not into the upside that Lloyd has or is perceived to have.
So Lloyd might have been my favorite running back during the the draft process this offseason. I think anybody watching on YouTube can see what Jagger thinks about Erickson's point here. So I want to toss it to you here.
Okay. Josh Jacobs had one of the least efficient seasons of his career, and you want to talk about bus meter. Anything that indicates that an elite running back is probably poised for a bust season, Josh Jacobs is at the top of all those lists. Moreover, I know you kind of hit on this, but to emphasize it, the Packers have never had like a running back eclipse 60% market share. And moreover, Josh Jacobs, he's clearly going to be in the early down role. Then for your other point on there about the 3 down, the 3-headed backfill, what about AJ Dillon says that he's going to get touches? They paid him,
they
but
brought him back. They didn't have to bring him back at all, but they did.
I think they just brought him back because they have a back that understands the system, and if anything happens to Josh Jacobs, they could pop him in. 2, Josh, we're talking about funny money. Josh Jacobs, and again, maybe like we're talking about redraft now, and this may be more a little bit dynasty on there. I don't know if he's going to be the guy for going forward. So I feel like they're going to be ready to pull Lloyd super fast. And then my last point on there, you remember that guy, Cliff Kingsbury, that I talked about? What if I told you that he was at USC during that time, and then MarShawn Lloyd was next to football Jesus, essentially, like Caleb Williams? So, and then when you look at how the NFL's moved, where we don't have a workhorse anymore, you want a running back who does the most with limited touches, and that has been the definition of MarShawn Lloyd's college career. The only point that I will concede to some that I'm surprised he didn't bring up was the fumble issue. So around his range, when you think about the best hit rates, you always want to go for the younger running backs or younger players in the deeper ranges, because most of the time they're the ones who hit over the veterans. That's just me. I just like MarShawn Lloyd. I haven't let get past me in any format, essentially. I'm a strong MarShawn Lloyd guy. Andrew, you have offended me, and I am hurt.
Well, I mean, but you even you kind of shed light on it too, where you talked about if Jacobs goes down, they're still going to use AJ. So you're okay with drafting a guy who's never going to be the bell cow. Like that's kind of what something you were saying.
No, I'm saying that AJ Dillon will get carries finally when Josh Jacobs goes down. What I'm saying is that like you know how you describe Zach Moss when you went on a full Kendrick Lamar just shred of Zach Moss. That's what I think of AJ Dillon, essentially. That like it'll take like a horrible catastrophe for AJ Dillon to be like a fantasy threat, and he won't do it because we've seen it. We're like, oh, it's AJ Dillon week, and then he comes out and gives us the weakest 8 points I've ever seen. Like we know what we've seen in AJ Dillon, but all the indicators think that I think MarShawn Lloyd is a high upside guy that I'm willing to bet on.
The other thing too in this backfield, like Josh Jacobs, I know it's fun to remember that 2022 season, but it's definitely the outlier in his career so far. I'm just getting older, like Jagger mentioned, with kind of a bit of funny money in the contract too. Like, I'm just not that concerned about Josh Jacobs. Like, if Lloyd is good, I don't think Josh Jacobs will get in the way of that.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Erickson?
I don't know. I feel like this is more of a, like, for example, like last year, maybe it's not a Tank Bigsby scenario, but more of like a Zach Charbonnet scenario where there's just two, like, we liked Charbonnet last year, but like Kenneth Walker. Yeah. So I'm trying to appease a little bit.
I'll accept it. I'll allow it.
Because it's like, if you drafted Charbonnet last year, like, he didn't really pan out. Like, you had you thought he could be an upside play because like maybe they use him a little more than Ken Walker. Ken Walker wasn't a perfect running back at the NFL. He had his moments, similar to Josh Jacobs has his moments, but like how bad does Josh Jacobs actually have to be for like the coaching staff to be like, all right, well, now we have to give the ball to MarShawn Lloyd, and how long is that going to take? And then, they also just have AJ Dillon like hanging out. Like, it just seems like a headache to me to look at the Green Bay Packers backfield and be like, okay, this is the week I can finally start MarShawn Lloyd and feel confident about it because Josh Jacobs is hurt. They've finally like neglected to use AJ Dillon. You look up and it's week 15. This is like, it took the entire season for it to happen. And maybe it pans out in the fantasy championships, but like, yeah. So those are the reasons why. So
we'll get out of there on that. I think it's a good spot to wrap up with Erickson deeply offending a first-time guest who we're happy to have on the show. But thank you for coming on, Jagger. This was great. Hopefully we can get you on again, later on here in the off season, maybe even in season. Everybody who listened, thank you so much for tuning in. I know it was a bit of a longer show, but we got through a lot of, I think, valuable players to talk about that might have been overlooked a bit this offseason in terms of being overvalued. So thank you, everybody, for sticking around. For Jagger and Erickson, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see you again next time.